Hello! Read it here. Today we're going to read a story from our Slash Nuclear Revenge. Now, for our first story. Make up rumors that I have CP, and I'm a prostitute because I won't date you? Goodbye to your new $150,000 car, and hello prison and a ruined life. Sorry not sorry. Me, 18M, unmedicated senior. Psycho incel, referred to as PI, M16. So for backstory, I was the only gay kid in what felt like my entire small deep south southern town, and came out very young, so that identity kind of stuck. My family was mostly very supportive, and I'm grateful for that, because outside of 2 to 3 friends, I might as well have had a Scarlet A branded to my forehead. Eventually, though, a few other people came out, one being PI, a very wealthy, spoiled, all-American entitled kid who drove a very, very expensive new car. Now, when he first came out, it was to no one's surprise. But regardless, a mutual friend was worried it would be a hard time and asked if I would befriend him, give him tips on how to get through it, etc. I, of course, said yes. Big mistake. Now, by this time, I never cared what anyone thought because the people who mattered had already made it apparent and vice versa. So, I was pretty open about the fact that I was actively dating someone much, much older than me. I don't want to hear it, that's not the point of the story, and it was a wonderful and healthy relationship that my conservative traditional dad even supported, so shut up. Now, after getting coffee with PI and being friendly, he apparently developed feelings for me. And after he confessed, I gently told him I was seeing someone and that I was very happy. This was common knowledge in our gossip-ridden high school anyhow, and that was apparently not acceptable to PI, and he went ballistic. In small towns, there are often what's known as junior-senior wars, where the 2 grades have a war of harmless albeit annoying pranks. However, our school was not completely uncivilized, so there was a group chat for both grades to discuss rules, limits, such as no damaging, no hitting houses if someone expressed that they weren't participating, renting, etc. Well, in that group chat with over 1,000 kids, PI thought it would be a great time to drop bombshell number 1. I had expressed that I was not participating, to not hit my house it's rented, and so on and so forth. QPI responding directly and saying, well, you can't afford to buy it with all the money you've been making being a prostitute for your 50-year-old boyfriend. I would like to say, first off, my boyfriend was nowhere near that age. I saw red. I loved that man to death and felt a forehead vein practically hemorrhage. Safe to say the rumor passed throughout the high school and the community. My coaches took me aside, our extra religious teachers tormented me more, and I was a pariah. Oh well, I had acceptance to a top university, my friends, boyfriend, and family. I was almost done. Then the next rumor dropped, and this is when I went nuclear. One day, I got a call from my friend, and immediately I knew something was wrong. Apparently, little PI had decided it was a good idea to lie and tell people I had 1. Cheated on my boyfriend, 2. Made a video with him, and 3. It was with a junior, someone under 18. None of which was remotely true. Thankfully, he was very popular and very straight, and also was an obsession of PI's and knew where it came from. And he agreed to, in writing, express none of this was true, and gave me copious amounts of evidence, screenshots of texts, Instagram DMS, etc. of PI's online harassment. I kept all of this in a file just in case this ever got out, and I needed to defend myself. And thankfully, it never became more than a funny, impossible, salacious story made up about me. However, it was too late for him, as I was already very mentally unstable, and this would have ruined everything I was riding on. Now on to the revenge, finally. So not only was PI's car brand new, but it was a new car because he had destroyed his old one and was not getting another. Love small town gossip, but also driving through someone's house is pretty conspicuous, LOL. Now, I'll admit I did not come up with this. I read it in a fanfiction, but it actually worked out very well. First thing I did was go to the furthest bait and tackle shop I could find and bought catfish bait. Now, if you don't fish, you might not know, but catfish love the stinkiest, smelliest bait you can find, and I bought a whole jar of the slop. I knew the parking lot of my school had no security or cameras because my car had already been vandalized. I did embrace the F word carved into my door with pride eventually. And then I got to work in the cold February morning. First thing I did was hammer nails into 3 of his tires. Now, this wouldn't pop them immediately, but they would eventually each deflate at much more inconvenient places, and nails would look more accidental than if they were slashed. Then I took poison ivy and rubbed it all over the door handles of his car. Afterwards, I took a mix of gravel and Vaseline and spread it all over the windshield wipers, which would just scratch the hell out of it once he used them. My favorite, however, was using the catfish bait. Knowing enough about cars, i.e. copious Googling, I figured out how to get to the AC portion and poured in the catfish bait. Sadly, I wouldn't be able to witness this, but he wouldn't be using his AC for another month or so since it's still cold. All that time for it to rot, fester, congeal, and the first day it's warm and he decides to blast AC, his car will be filled with the fumes of 1,000 rotten piles of roadkill and low tide without any idea where it's coming from or how to get rid of it. The next part of this story is honestly out of pure dumb luck, and I can't claim complete responsibility for the universe's work. However, I, being the obsessive paranoid type, would check his socials from a burner account now and again, perhaps hoping to hear about his fishy car or to see if he aired out more rumors about me. One day I found something odd. Nothing. Every single social media was gone. Out of pure curiosity, I Googled his name and found something very juicy and very crazy. He was arrested in an entirely different state for attempting to impersonate a government official and bring a gun into a theme park. Safe to say that didn't fly, but it also did not get enough traction as I would like. And thus, I sent it to everyone I knew in our small town, his summer job, future college, or high school, that giant group chat of over 1,000 people. Yeah, got sent there as well. By the end of the day, he was a pariah, jobless, and collegeless. I left my town, and honestly haven't heard anything about him since, but I can't imagine he amounted to much being that insane, and with that type of crime as well. TLDR guy is mad, I won't date him. Tells my town I'm a prostitute because of the age difference, then further tries to tell people I'm a pedophile, so I destroy his car and ruin his reputation. Let's hear from the comment section. Comment 1. We did this to a guy in my freshman year of college. He had spent the year stealing from everyone and rubbing it in people's faces, puking in halls, etc. His roommate moved out but gave access to the room to anyone that wanted revenge. A number of people used his dresser drawers and closet for a toilet. I personally superglued his gas cap flap shut before he left at semester's end. But our RA, who may have hated him most of all, took 2 tubes of that catfish bait, chicken blood and guts variety, got the guy's car keys, and emptied those tubes into every gap between seat cushions he could find. He even filled up the car's ashtray. This was 1990. Cars still had those, with the stuff. All of this was in May in South Carolina. One can only imagine the unholy stench after that car sat in the sun for a few days. Dude never said a word, but the ashtray was seen on his desk, washed and scrubbed. He transferred the next year. Comment 2. Okay, so this was a fantastic revenge, and I'm glad you got to give him what was coming to him. But I gotta say it, you may want to invest in some extra security wherever you live. If he's nuts enough to not only try to socially destroy you, but to try and smuggle a gun into a theme park to do who knows what with it, he's definitely crazy enough to try and harm you as retaliation for your revenge. Especially if he figures out that the burner account belonged to you, but he doesn't even have to figure it out to blame you anyway. Please be careful and keep yourself safe. Comment 3. Man, PI was a real piece of work. But, man, I actually LOL'd when I read the part about the catfish bait. Never smelt the stuff myself, but I read a story about a construction crew that, when they got screwed over by the client, stuffed the HVAC units to the brim with that stuff. The way the smell was described, that smell must have smelt like a shard from Satan himself. Comment 4. Such an entitled creep, he can't even take no for an answer. However, I do recommend to watch your back. Sadly, once you get falsely accused of being a predator, you can't easily get rid of it, and it's sad. If anyone else who falsely accused you, if they ever dug this allegation will use it against you, you should hire a lawyer and sue them for defamation. Now, for our second story. My fiancé cheated with several men, including a sex offender, so I took my revenge. After being asked by many people why that wasn't posted to Nuclear or Pro Revenge, I have decided to try again. Moderators at Pro explained why it didn't qualify and suggested Nuclear, but it never posted after my submission. I think maybe it was because my account was only days old, so fingers crossed it works this time. I met my ex in 2012, right after I just turned 30. I had only dated and been with women exclusively until I came out as bisexual at 28. Let's just say the year I was 29 was a busy year, making up for what I missed out on. It was mostly casual hookups, yes, safe, and I did try dating 2 different guys for a few weeks, but it just never worked out or got serious. I kind of figured that I'd probably end up marrying a woman or not getting married at all, because I just didn't see myself catching romantic and sexual feelings for a guy. Then I met Ryan. From the first date, it was just like the only other time in my life I had fallen in love, butterflies, constantly thinking about him, wanting to spend every moment with him. He fell for me hard too, and we became an item. Though he did say while he considered my bisexuality a turn-on because he had a thing for straight guys, it also gave him pause because of my desires for the opposite sex and his concern it may lead me astray. I thought about it and understood it was a legitimate worry, but assured him that I couldn't even think about anyone else because I was really into him. Note, I knew he was the one by the end of the first month, and I was in love, but I wasn't going to say these things too soon and risk scaring him off. On our first date, he admitted to me that he was legally blind due to a genetic disorder and that it was progressive and eventually he would only have a sliver of his peripheral vision. He immediately said he understood if I didn't want to see him again because no other guy had wanted to date him and be his driver all of the time. I grew up with a brother in a wheelchair who never learned how to walk or talk due to misdiagnosed meningitis at 6 months old back in the 70s. I told him that and said that what my brother had was a severe disability. So in my perspective, his blindness had no effect in my feelings and that always being the driver was a small sacrifice just to be with him. The following years were bliss. We brought out the best in each other. My family, who was surprised but very supportive when I came out, adored Ryan and treated him like family and said that I acted happier since we'd been together. When I met him, he was working part-time in retail and had done very poorly in high school because he lost a lot of his confidence as his vision deteriorated. I told him that one thing I did insist on was that he do something with his life because he had too much to offer and that I would help. He said that he'd wanted to be a teacher but didn't think someone with limited vision could teach. Nonsense. So I put him through community college for 2 years, then 2.5 years of a local university, and finally the 1-year teacher certification program as required by California. I drove countless miles and paid hundreds in public transportation costs for him, never blinking an eye or complaining. We'd been together for 7.5 years, and were engaged to be married in October by the time he was in his last semester of his teaching certification, which involved him student teaching at his former high school with his favorite teacher from his days in school. Then the pandemic hit, and schools closed. Fortunately, he'd had enough hours in the classroom that he would still qualify to be certified after the governor issued a waiver via executive order. On the 3rd day of the stay-at-home order in March, my life crumbled when I innocently found out he had cheated on me with an ex-all because he handed his phone to me to show me something on Instagram. I accidentally fat-thumbed the back arrow when he gave it to me, taking me back to a list of all his messages. I looked and recognized the name of his ex, Johnny, as the second message, dated a week ago. I clicked on it and my heart sank. Directions to my house, pictures, dirty talk, and reassuring Johnny not to worry about me, because he had my location on my Find My Friends, just in case I came home from work. I immediately started screaming, demanding to know everything, and he admitted to having his ex over twice for sex, and that they didn't use protection. Johnny was engaged to his GF during this, adding another victim. Then he admitted to sleeping with his straight but curious recently single cousin Tyler, twice, again no protection. Finally, he admitted to sleeping with a supposedly straight guy named Tomas that he and many of my cousins went to school with, who I told Ryan I really didn't like him or want them talking because I didn't trust him after what I'd read about him. Since they were never close friends, I didn't feel like this was a big sacrifice or that I was being too controlling, and I assumed that he knew why I and all my cousins felt that way, but didn't bother repeating it. The reason was after high school at age 20, this guy was convicted of sexual assault and penetration with a foreign object against a 16-year-old girl and had gone to jail and required to register as a sex offender for life. Apparently, my ex was the only person in his graduating class that hadn't heard that news. All of this happened in my home while I was working. We spent the whole weekend crying, with me asking over and over why and him repeatedly crying and saying he just didn't know and that he felt terrible. Monday comes around and anger started being as common as sadness, and I made a comment that said I was going to pull all the phone records going back the 3 years that at NT kept them for a fee. Only when he heard that did he admit to one more guy. Some random named Frankie off the gay hookup app Grindr, who was the first guy he cheated with and continued to casually hook up with for nearly 2 years, with the last time being in February, the month before. He told me how it started. Get this, it was the day after his graduation with his BA in May 2018, and he was drunk from celebrating and wanted to have sex. I too had been celebrating with him and said I was too drunk to perform and said I'd make it up the next day, then passed out asleep on the couch. Apparently, he was angry horny because he downloaded Grindr, chatted with this Frankie fellow, and arranged to have sex in his car in a church parking lot across the street from our condo, which happens to be across the street from a school. This fact is important later. All while I slept on the couch. All the times they hooked up after that was again in my condo while I was working or visiting a friend for the night up the coast. He used to love going but started saying he couldn't occasionally because of homework and studying. I absolutely lost it. Told him to get in the car, and I drove him to his family's house so he could tell them what he did so they understood why he was moving back into their house. While he was in the house, I was in the driveway on the phone with an NT ordering the 3 years worth of detailed call/text logs, then made an appointment to be screened for STIs. I suspended his service until he could figure out how to pay for his own damn phone. Then I temporarily changed all his passwords on the social media accounts he cheated with, and to make sure he couldn't hide more evidence, so only I would have access to his cloud. We shared each other's passwords on his suggestions years before. I also called the bank and issued a stop payment on his final tuition check that I had sent to the certification program the week before and hadn't hit the bank yet. Before deleting his social media, except Facebook, I took screenshots of the entire Instagram conversation with Johnny the Ex and mailed the conversation to his fiancée, who deserved to know so she could see a doctor and get tested too. His family was very religious and had kicked him out in high school for 3 days when he tried to admit he was bi and only took him back in when he took it back. Needless to say, she ended it, he got kicked out. One down. He came back out to the car and we went home. I took his house key and told him to say goodbye to our 3 pets and get packing. The entire time he packed, I studied those phone records to find out dates, times, and if there was anyone else he was leaving out. He answered every question I asked, and it was then that I discovered that Tomas the sex offender, and he had only had oral sex in my home, and that the actual sex was in the same parking lot he screwed the Frankie guy in. The wheels started turning, and the next day I walked over to the church, and sure enough spotted a camera. I spoke to a secretary, sweet old lady, at the church and informed them about a registered sex offender having sex in their lot, and that not only was it a violation of his parole for indecent exposure, but that he was not allowed to be that close to a school, and I provided the date. I was in luck. They had a digital 2-year loop system that started deleting day by day after it had been retained for 2 years. It was April 2020, and he first cheated with Frankie in May 2018, and the sex offender was in April 2019. I told them I was filing a police report, and that probation would require a copy of it eventually. They said they would save the file and allowed me a thumb drive of both days to submit with my police report. Within a month, Tomas the sex offender was locked up again. 2 down. I also filed a police report against the Frankie guy. The police said it was a relatively minor infraction, but since it was across from a school playground and skate park, they would follow up, but there would be no jail time. I researched the hell out of Frankie and called him to confront him. He was smug and admitted to knowing about me the whole time. What he didn't know is that I had found out he had a job that required a security clearance, and he had several judgments against him, and collection agencies had been looking for him. Best dollar I ever spent on a data collection site. I didn't know why they couldn't find him and just garnish his wages, but it ends up he was Hispanic and had 2 last names and was a junior. Plus, he frequently by his middle name Francisco, Frankie for short, so he got lost in the paperwork confusion. I sent a letter to the collection agencies providing his employer and current location and contact info, and then sent a copy of the police report about misdemeanor indecent exposure for which he pled guilty, and it was a fine with community service, not considered a sex crime. His wages did get garnished, but only for 2 paychecks because the misdemeanor was enough for him to lose his security clearance and get fired. 3 down. Then I contacted Ryan's family on his mother's side, pretending to be him from his Facebook account, making sure they knew he had fucked his cousin Tyler. It spread through the family like wildfire, and soon Tyler was contacting me because he couldn't get a hold of Ryan to ask why he would expose what they did. I just laughed and said you shouldn't screw your cousins, especially when they're engaged, and that he'd messed around in my house. So now it was my turn for payback. 4 down. Lastly, I had already stopped payment, but since he was so close to finishing, I was sure his family would bail him out and pay the university. Like I said, indecent exposure is usually a slap on the wrist type misdemeanor. However, I remembered some of the paperwork he signed to be a mandated reporter that you could lose teaching certification for documented acts of moral turpitude. I sent a copy of both police reports from the parking lot with still shots from the security footage clearly showing Ryan's face to the school district he'd been student teaching in, and a copy to the Commission on Teacher Credentials. Fifth and final down. Admittedly, I did all this out of anger, but he shattered my sense of self-worth and made me incredibly bitter and untrusting after years of being generous and supporting him. Everywhere I looked in the town, I thought of Ryan and the cheating. I felt a terrible energy in my condo knowing it all happened there. I stayed 9 months and watched all 5 of their lives self-destruct. Then sold my condo, making a nice profit, and relocated to the PNW to start over. One thing that is sad is I found out just recently that his ex, whose fiancée broke up with him, ended up committing suicide several months after I moved. It is too bad that his family was so close-minded to turn on their own son, but in the end, it's not my fault that he cheated on his fiancée by coming into my home at my fiancée's invitation to cheat. Suicide is never the answer to one's problems, and I hope the fiancée he cheated on doesn't blame herself, and that only his family does, as they should. TLDR, I emotionally and financially supported my ex through college and his teacher credential program for over 7 years, only to discover he had cheated on me with 4 different guys. One of them the day after he graduated, and then occasionally for nearly 2 years in my home while I was at work. I took my revenge. My ex lost his career before it even started, and our relationship, one AP affair partner, lost his job and had bill collectors after him. Another lost his fiancée and was kicked out. A third was humiliated when his entire family found out he had sex with his cousin, and the fourth was put in jail for violating probation. Lesson: don't cheat and deceive, or fuck around and find out. Let's hear from the comment section. Comment 1. That was so fucking sad. Then so calculated and savage. Skull bro did the math. Nobody deserves to be betrayed and cheated on, and damn did you make sure he learned that lesson. Skull nuclear for sure. Comment 2. When I read stories on nuclear revenge, I often do so to feel secondhand glee at the bad guy getting his comeuppance, something that does not happen often in real life. Let's be honest, people often get away with their horrible actions. Reading this did not evoke the same emotions in me. Honestly, it's very sad. Yes, the fiancé got what he deserved, but OP will likely never invest as sincerely and as honestly and as unconditionally in any future relationship as he did in this one. What OP did for another person was so very precious. So many people would do anything to have that kind of honest love directed at them. And it is utterly tragic that OP would likely never give of himself again to anyone after this. Comment 3. Oh, bad. There isn't a way to reclaim the money you paid on his education up until that point too. It sounds like he deserved all of it. It's despicable to treat someone who's tried to build you up and support you like that so poorly. I might feel bad for some of those other partners because of what they may or may not have known or what they may have been misled to believe, but that's a risk you take. Comment 4. Your writing style, the flow, the revenge. You are a master. This was beautiful. No notes. Bravo, good sir. And may I say, what an absolutely amazing and incredible takedown. Right now, I am putting my phone down and giving you a standing ovation. I'm sorry you had to deal with that, but you are brilliant and deserve everything. Now, for our third story. Have an affair on my friend. Nope. A childhood friend that was the most empathetic, kind guy I've ever known did a hitch in the Navy, went into computers, and played guitar in a band, married a pretty mean girl that liked the idea of a big wedding and musician husband, but had no interest in a marriage. She was her family's golden child, drop-dead gorgeous, and completely narcissistic spoiled. They buy land. He borrows money and has his family build their house to reduce costs. He was paying them back over time while she spent money and socialized, sometimes working a part-time job. Inside of 2 years, she's bored and starts an affair, or we think never stopped affairs, but gets caught. And while the empathetic guy tries to work things out, she makes false accusations of domestic abuse and files for divorce. with restraining order keeping him out of the home he and his family built with their own hands. Now keep in mind he's still paying his family back for the home, still ordered to pay for the land, and most of the upkeep/maintenance. He's back in his childhood bedroom while his wife entertains her men in that house. With some research by the lawyer, the family still technically own the house. Now, my family owned a heavy equipment business, including house/structural movers. Look up house movers to verify what I said. When she went on vacation with her family and new boyfriend, we went in, jacked up the house, and drove off with it. Repossessed. The structure wasn't covered in the court order, just the mortgage land. She had legal claim to the land. Her name was on the mortgage, but the structure appeared nowhere on the deed, and there was still money owed on most of the materials/labor, so it was simply reposted. Now, the judge wasn't happy at all, but it wasn't illegal to repossess since the land mortgage was the only thing he was court-ordered to pay. She came home to foundation, pipes and wires sticking out of the ground, and a crappy used yard barn with her personal possessions in it. Now, it wouldn't be nuclear if it stopped there. Since the main character has recently passed away, I can tell more. We had a guy we called Big Bob, and the name fits. Everyone probably knows someone that defies jail, death, is a walking demolition crew. And in fact, we called him Demolition Man for a while after the movie. Apparently, someone put huge dildos smeared with dried whipped cream crust in her possessions found when her dad and friends came to get the rest of her possessions out of the yard barn. There were also extreme insertion porn and bestiality porn magazines, bongs shaped like cocks, etc. Someone used her pictures in the dating magazines, pre-internet, for a paid escort with her phone number. Her parents even had to change their phone numbers a few times. Someone got those change of address cards from the post office and sent her mail around the country. Someone knew exactly when the legal separation happened, and she was supposed to get her own car insurance, but she didn't get that letter. Her car burned down in her workplace parking lot a few days after the legal separation happened, and of course, she didn't get the insurance company notification in the mail, so no insurance. Someone had intimate pictures printed, man's face blacked out on flyers. The printing pointed out that wasn't her husband at the time and stuck them under windshield wipers at her family's church, every place she worked, all around her neighborhood. Cops got involved in that, but they couldn't find where the flyers were printed. Big Bob was an over-the-road truck driver. Everything died down when she finally agreed to let our friend buy her out on the land for a reasonable sum, paying for it twice, and dropped the restraining order. Less than a week after he had cleared title, the house showed back up right where it was before. Since it was still on the steel used to move it, all we had to do was stick a truck back under it and take it back, hook it up. This was until she decided to marry a guy from a hard-working family that were doing well. She love-bombed the poor, hard-working sap. He never knew what hit him. She had a bachelorette party with her pretty mean girlfriends at a local recreation lake and rubbed it in her bachelorette party was going to cost more. Be better than her wedding to my friend. I think that's what Cade the nuclear revenge. The flyers showed up all over at his bachelor party, at his parents' house with his family. And her bachelorette party got busted for drugs where they found several people in various stages of undress, including the bride-to-be, and quite a bit of drugs, bunches of alcohol, etc. When that wedding blew up, the wedding dress from the first marriage to our friend showed up on a scarecrow with a pentagram on the front, what looked like blood paint on it in her front yard. No one even missed the wedding dress from the first wedding until then. Every woke place, every time she dated someone seriously, etc., the flyers showed back up. She finally gained about 50 to 70 pounds and quit trying to date seriously. She looked like her 70-pound, overweight mother, but 30 years earlier. She married a fat truck driver eventually. R.I.P. Big Bob. You were one hell of a friend, and we are all going to miss you. We will sing the song of your people and raise a glass to you every time we meet. Let's hear from the comment section. Comment 1. Another friend had a GF/fiancé cheat on him, but she decided to total his house when she got caught. He's passed away now, but she's been getting obscene gummy bears for 30 years. The last one was a huge dildo cast into hard acrylic, weighs about 30 pounds, and it got screwed to the hood of her car, then the screw head stripped out. She got obscene gummy bear stencils painted on her car also. It's not the guy she cheated on. The stencils were painted after she tried to show up at his funeral. Come to think of it, she hasn't got a gummy bear in a while. When you get caught cheating, you shouldn't destroy the guy's house you cheated on, then tell a room full of his friends he has a dick the size of a gummy bear. It might haunt you. Comment 2. We were in diapers together, The geeks slash nerds slash loosens together in school. Most of us did a hitch in the military, so we are vets together. We have helped start slash support each other's businesses. We are all each other's kids' godfathers, etc. Bob had no filters. Short of psychical harm to females, there wasn't much off the table for him. And you never get to mess with his little buddy like she did. We are all big workhorse farm slash construction boys. The betrayed husband was the smallest of us, so big brother instinct kicks in when someone messes with him. Bob was a frigging force of nature. How he never got arrested or died is beyond me. And absolutely, one believes the Big Bob stores unless they were there. My wife didn't until she saw with her own eyes a copperhead snake strike at Bob, and he bitch slapped it. The circular snake shoot took place, and you wouldn't believe that 7 or 8 guys stood in a tight circle around a snake and shot it to pieces. The kicker was, it was full of babies that flew all over us. My then girlfriend, now wife, saw that and had 911 on speed dial, but no one died even though we had to pull bullet jackets out of our cloths and slap off baby copperheads. When Bob worked for our family business, we got a 71 miles per hour in a 55 miles per hour zone speeding ticket in a truck with an entire 3-bedroom house on the back. We get together every year and race plastic Barbie cars down a big hill, alcohol and BBQ involved, the past few years a live band, etc. About 300 people last year. It's on Armed Forces Day, veterans involved, and there was actually an artificial leg bet and lost. The guy had to wait until the next year to win it back. A bet is a bet. It's the one to go. Guys, they never ask where or what. It might be building or wiring someone's house or garage. It might be sky or scuba diving. You may need spare socks and bail money, but it's not boring. Back when I first started dating my wife, she said she hadn't flown before. So her first flight was on the Goodyear blimp. We bought a lot of tires back then and got tickets. Between the bunch, we can move about anything. We can build about anything, including finishing concrete. There are computer guys, serious race cars slash car weekends. You just never know what's next. We are slowing down now that we are in our 60s. I have a picture of me, Big Bob, and another guy on the top of a moving van. Bob has a ghetto blaster on his shoulder. It was blasting Motley Crue, and we are doing the ZZ Top shuffle at about 50 miles per hour. Almost got arrested that day. The state police were not amused, but the car show crowd loved it. We don't mess with civilians, play by the rules, and you have nothing to worry about. It's not a good idea to screw with any of us or families. We take that personal. If you think Big Bob is an exaggeration, I'm 6 feet 5 inches and he was taller than me. Comment 3. I knew a couple guys like you when I was in the Army. Last name started with a K and another with an N, but they were the type of dudes who epitomize corn-fed and farm-bred country boys. Completely immune to tasers, as we found out. Good times. Good guys to have on your side. Comment 4. Beautiful wipes tears for my just beautiful. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe to see more.